44 seconds. That was all it took for a masked figure to grab an 84-year-old grandmother right off her own porch in a quiet Tucson neighborhood. But the real shock isn't the kidnapping itself. It's what happened next at her son-in-law's house. 6 separate times, the FBI showed up there, walking out each time with one of those plain brown paper evidence bags. You know the kind. The ones reserved strictly for biological material. Something does not add up. Stick with me. This gets really strange. It's day 26 in the search for Nancy Gothrey, and the whole thing has been chaos for everyone following it. Hundreds of agents, including the FBI, are still combing the area, yet a brand new piece of surveillance footage just surfaced. Not from the police, from Fox News investigators who went looking where nobody else did. A Ring camera 2.5 miles from Nancy's front door caught a single car sliding past at 2:36 in the morning, exactly 8 minutes after her pacemaker lost its Bluetooth connection to the phone she left inside. 8 minutes. That is the exact window it would take to drag her out, load her into a waiting vehicle, and disappear down a dark back road that avoids every major camera and license plate reader. But here is the problem. The sheriff had drawn a hard 2-mile radius and told everyone inside it to check their doorbell cams. This house sat just outside that line, half a mile beyond it. No one from law enforcement had knocked on that door in 25 days. The owners said it themselves. The FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Office had no idea the footage even existed until journalists handed it over. That detail changes everything. A massive federal operation somehow missed what could be the getaway car, simply because it fell outside an arbitrary circle. What do you think really happened here? Did the person who took Nancy know exactly where every camera was? Or did they just get incredibly lucky while everyone else was looking in the wrong direction? The more you look, the more it feels like the answers have been hiding in plain sight all along. But here's the problem. The video isn't crystal clear. Night vision on a moving target rarely is. Yet Fox News brought in a retired detective and national security expert named Pat Brosnan to break it down frame by frame. He didn't just see a blur. He saw a very specific vehicle shape. The sloped roofline, the unique window design, the rear quarter glass, and especially those vertical brake lights. Brosnan concluded it is very likely a Kia Soul. That boxy, unmistakable body style stands out even in the dark. And for the first time in nearly a month, we finally have something solid to look for. The sheriff still hasn't put out an official bolo, like they did with the white Elantra in Idaho. But this is the first tangible lead we've had. Something does not add up. The same camera also caught 12 different vehicles passing between midnight and 6 a.m. Not exactly rush hour. Those other cars could belong to innocent people who just happened to be out that night. Or they could be witnesses who saw something. A car pull over, a strange figure, anything. The FBI should be knocking on every one of those doors right now. But they couldn't, because until journalists handed over the footage, law enforcement didn't even know it existed. That detail changes everything. A crucial clue sat just outside their 2-mile line, and no one went looking. What do you think really happened here? Was this simple lack of resources, or an unacceptable professional oversight? Because the more you dig, the more it feels like the most unsettling answers aren't out on some dark road at all. They are much closer to home. Let's talk about the inner circle, the people who had access, the people who had knowledge, and most importantly, the people who had the opportunity. This is where things start to feel off. On the night Nancy disappeared, the family had gathered for a completely normal evening. Dinner, card games, the kind of warm, ordinary night people spend together. Her son-in-law Tommaso was there. At 9:50 p.m., he drove Nancy home, walked her inside, said goodnight, and left. The neighborhood went quiet. Then, exactly 3 hours and 57 minutes later, at 1:47 a.m., the Nest camera on her front porch was manually disconnected. Tommaso lives less than 4 miles away, 10 minutes in the middle of the night. That leaves a 4-hour window with no public alibi. 4 hours is more than enough time to go home, wait for your own family to settle in, change clothes, maybe pull on a cheap synthetic ski mask, nitrile gloves, and a light jacket. Plenty of time to drive back across town, park a few blocks away, and walk up to that porch like you already knew every inch of it. And that is when things changed. Because the person who stepped onto Nancy's porch that night didn't move like a stranger. He didn't crouch. He didn't scan for witnesses. He walked straight to the camera with calm, familiar confidence and tapped the lens twice with 2 fingers. Not a frantic smash. A light, deliberate touch. The kind of touch you give something you've touched 100 times before. Stick with me. This gets really strange. But here's the problem. The person who stepped onto that porch didn't move like someone who had just broken into a stranger's home in the middle of the night. No crouching. No frantic glances over the shoulder. No rush to stay hidden. Instead, he walked straight up with his calm, almost casual confidence, like the space already belonged to him. And then he did something that still gives me chills every time I watch it. He reached up and tapped the camera lens twice, slowly, lightly, 2 fingers. Not a smash, not a yank, just a deliberate little tap. Forensic psychologists call that exact gesture a touch of ownership. It's the subconscious move you make when you believe, deep down, that the thing you're touching is yours. You don't plan it. You can't fake it. It just slips out. And that detail changes everything. After the tap, he didn't panic. He simply picked up a small branch with some leaves still on it and gently laid it over the lens. No spray paint, no violent yank, just the calm, familiar motion you'd use to straighten a crooked picture frame in your own hallway. Memory muscle. The kind that only comes from doing the exact same thing in the exact same spot more times than you can count. Something does not add up. If this was a random stranger, why did he move like he already knew every inch of that porch? Why did he treat the camera like it was just another object in a house he'd visited 100 times before? This is where things start to feel off. Because when analysts strip the 44 seconds of infrared footage down to pure geometry, using the standard size bricks on Nancy's front steps as a scale, they built a precise physical profile of the suspect. Height between 5'9" and 5'11", around 230 pounds, a noticeably longer torso compared to the legs, wide hips, a robust, thick-set build. They laid that profile right next to every available photo of Tommaso they could find. Family pictures, old band promo shots, 15 years of classroom images. The overlap was significant. Not courtroom-proof on its own, but uncomfortable enough that you can't just shrug it off. What do you think really happened here? And then they zoomed in even tighter, right into the eye holes of that cheap $22 ski mask. The eyebrows were clearly visible, and they were groomed, neat, maintained. The kind of eyebrows that belong to someone who looks in the mirror every morning and cares how the world sees him. Not the wild, untouched brows of a desperate transient. The kind you'd see on a teacher who has to stand in front of a classroom full of kids every single day. That small detail quietly shatters the random stranger theory and points straight back toward someone local, someone known, someone whose public face matters. Stick with me, because the next layer makes it even harder to look away. But here's the problem. When forensic image analysts stripped those same 44 seconds down to the smallest visible details, they didn't see the gear of a hardened professional. They saw the opposite. A basic synthetic ski mask you can buy for $22 at any big box sporting goods store. Black knitted gloves, the cheap disposable kind mechanics and restaurant workers use by the box for $10. And on his back, a Nosar backpack with bright reflective strips running down both shoulder straps. The exact kind designed to light you up like a Christmas tree under any passing headlight. Then there was the holster, A belly band, the kind meant to sit flat against your skin under your clothes for deep concealment. Except this guy had it strapped on top of a thick jacket, loose, flapping around his torso like it didn't even belong there. A former federal agent who reviewed the footage put it bluntly: nobody with a single day of real training would ever carry a gun that way. Something does not add up. On the surface, it screams amateur. Someone who threw the whole outfit together in a panic. Zero experience, pure desperation. But here is where things start to feel off. What if the sloppiness wasn't a mistake at all? What if every cheap, mismatched, obviously wrong piece was chosen on purpose? Psychologists who study criminal behavior have a name for this: calculated incompetence. You dress and act just incompetent enough to fit investigators the exact profile they expect to chase: a desperate, uneducated outsider, while the real mind behind it sits back and watches them run in the wrong direction. That detail changes everything. Because the man who supposedly pulled this off also knew enough to manually disable a cloud-connected Nest camera, even if he didn't realize the footage had already uploaded the second motion was triggered. He knew enough to set up a Bitcoin wallet and demand $6 million in ransom, yet not enough to understand that the tiny test payment the FBI dropped into it would light up every digital alarm they needed. And that wallet? It has sat completely silent. Not one single login. Not one check of the balance. Stick with me. This gets really strange. The FBI didn't need 6 million to move. They only needed one nervous click. So either the person behind the mask is sophisticated enough to spot the trap and is now frozen in fear, or he was never a professional at all. Just smart enough to build the frame of a modern crime, but not experienced enough to see the invisible wires the feds had already strung across it. What do you think really happened here? Because every new layer keeps pulling us back toward the same quiet house less than 10 minutes away. The same man who drove Nancy home that night and had 4 long hours no one can account for. And the answers are still waiting in a lab. But here is the problem. While those digital breadcrumbs were sitting there, waiting for one nervous click, the investigation suddenly exploded in a completely different direction. On the night of February 13th, just 2 kilometers from Nancy's house, a massive tactical operation came crashing down on a silver Range Rover and a young man inside it. This wasn't some quiet knock on the door. An airplane had been circling overhead for hours, tracking the vehicle from the sky. When the man left his mother's house to grab food at a local Culver's, 2 teams moved at once. One unit boxed him in the parking lot, cuffed him, and put him in the back of a patrol car. At the exact same moment, another team swept the house, pulled his mother out, and executed a full search warrant. Something does not add up. They had cell phone data placing him in the area, a criminal history that included drug trafficking, and a physical description that roughly matched the masked figure on the porch, plus a credible tip that pointed straight at him. For a few tense hours, it looked like the case might be over, but it wasn't. After hours of questioning and a deep search, both the man and his mother were released. No charges, no arrest. Just like that, the whole dramatic scene evaporated. That detail changes everything. Because watch how aggressively law enforcement moved on this outsider. Aerial surveillance, simultaneous raids, public handcuffs in a parking lot. They hit him with everything they had the second they had probable cause. Now compare that to how they have been treating Tommaso. 6 separate visits to the son-in-law's house. Calm, methodical, no sirens, no show of force. And each time the agents left, carrying one of those plain brown paper evidence bags. The kind used only for biological material. Sweat, skin cells, hair, DNA. 6 times. Not a single tactical raid. No public spectacle. Just quiet, repeated trips and those careful paper bags. Stick with me. This gets really strange. A street-level suspect with a record gets the full Hollywood treatment. The man married to the victim's daughter, living 10 minutes away, with a 4-hour alibi gap and a physical profile that lines up uncomfortably well gets the slow, scientific treatment. What do you think really happened here? Because right now, the investigation is speaking in two completely different voices. And the louder the noise gets, the harder it is to ignore what feels off. But here's the problem. While law enforcement hit that outsider with everything they had, the treatment of Tommaso has been completely different. 6 separate visits to the same house. No sirens, no tactical teams, no public spectacle. Just quiet, methodical entries and exits. Each time carrying out one of those plain brown paper evidence bags, the kind reserved exclusively for biological material. Something does not add up. And then, right in the middle of all this, a respected former FBI special agent named Maureen O'Donnell was being interviewed about the case. She was discussing possible scenarios when she casually dropped a line that stopped everyone cold. She said the sheriff has completely exonerated every member of the family and anyone connected to them. Completely. That detail changes everything. Because at the exact same moment the sheriff is supposedly clearing the inner circle, federal agents are still showing up at Tommaso's door for the 6th time and walking out with DNA evidence. This is where things start to feel off. You cannot have both realities existing at once. If the family has been fully clear, why are agents returning again and again to collect biological samples? And if the FBI is still digging that deep, why would the local sheriff publicly or privately push the narrative that everyone inside the house is innocent? Stick with me. This gets really strange. There are whispers behind the scenes of real friction between the agencies. The kind of turf war you see when local police feel the big federal machine rolling into their town and taking over. Rumors of arguments over which lab would even test the evidence. On paper, the agents on the ground get along fine, but higher up the chain, the egos are clashing. What do you think really happened here? Is the sheriff protecting a local family going through hell and jumping the gun on clearance? Or is the FBI seeing something the locals missed and simply refusing to say it out loud? Either way, the public is left in the dark, watching two arms of the same investigation pull in opposite directions. And while the arguments continue, Nancy is still missing, and the only thing that truly matters is still sitting silent in a lab. But here's the problem. While the agencies argue over labs and credit, the only thing that actually matters is sitting completely silent under fluorescent lights in a federal forensics lab right now. That single black nitrile glove found along the logical escape route, and right beside it, the biological samples pulled from Tommaso's house inside those plain brown paper bags, both of them waiting for the same answer. Something does not add up. Millions of dollars in sequencing technology are quietly doing their work. The science doesn't care what the sheriff told the press. It doesn't care about turf wars or press conferences. It only reads sequences. And when those two samples talk to each other, there will be no gray area. This is where things start to feel off. Because after 26 days, the neighborhood is already starting to look normal again. No knock signs are going up to push the news vans out. Reporters are packing up their cameras. The garage door on Nancy's house has finally closed. The street is going back to sleep. But that glove is still on the table. Those paper bags are still sealed, and the person who stepped onto that porch is still breathing the same air we are. That detail changes everything. The case hasn't gone cold. It has simply gone quiet. What do you think really happened here? Are we watching a random stranger vanish into the desert? Or are we watching the slow, careful unraveling of something much closer to home? Stick with me, because the science is still working. And when it finally speaks, it won't whisper. But here's the problem. After everything we have seen, the science is still the only voice that cannot lie. That glove and those paper bags are under the same lights right now, waiting for one match. And while the neighborhood goes back to quiet, the person who stepped onto that porch is still out there, breathing the same air we breathe. Something does not add up. This is where things start to feel off. Because the longer you sit with this case, the more you realize the scariest part is not some masked stranger vanishing into the desert. It is how ordinary it all looks. A man who drove his mother-in-law home after dinner, said goodnight, then supposedly had 4 quiet hours no one can explain. A teacher who stands in front of kids every day with neat eyebrows and a normal life. The kind of guy you would never look at twice. That detail changes everything. We are trained by movies to expect monsters in the shadows. But sometimes the person who knows every inch of the porch, who taps the camera like it belongs to him, who can build just enough of a plan to look sloppy on purpose, is the one who sat across from you at the dinner table. I keep thinking about that. Notebook B, thanks you for watching. If you stay all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts below, because right now the lab is still working in silence, and the truth, whatever it is, feels like it is only just getting started. Notebook. But thanks you for watching. If you stayed all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts below, because right now the lab is still working in silence, and the truth, whatever it is, feels like it is only just getting started.